it has three other states, okay, and it has an arrow pointing to each of them. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and the start state has no arrows coming in. Right? It's all output. You're not allowed to have any arrows coming in. Now this one here, of course, this is not a transition arrow. Remember, it's just it's just your start. It's the start state indicator, if you like. So it's, this detached arrow. It just tells you that this state here is your start state. Okay, so that doesn't count. All right. So you can see, you can see this state has no arrows, transition arrows, coming into it. Right? You can just see that. Okay? So those two things, well, you can almost call them two conditions. But anyways, so well, say it again. The start state has transition arrows to every other state. Okay. So they've got three other states. So 1, 2, 3 transition arrows, and the start state has no arrows coming from it from any other state. Right? There are no transition arrows. It's all output, so to speak. They're all transition arrows leaving the start state, but none coming in. Right? So that's the first one. That's your first condition, first constraint on your G in FA, that and you impose this constraint to make it useful, and you won't see that why it's useful till later. Okay, you just have to accept this for the moment. All right, now the second one. There's only one except state. Well, it's compatible, yeah. But in a G NFA, only one except state. Okay. That's what it says here, and that except state has arrows. And you can probably see this first line usually. That except state has arrows coming in from every other state. Okay, so the accept state, there's only one of them, right? And it will have transition arrows coming into it from every other state. Now this accept state here, there are three other states, right? And the accept state will have transition arrows coming into it from all of the other states. So it should have three input arrows. 1, 2, 3. Okay? And it seems both of these are two-part parts. Okay. But no arrows going to any other state. Well, actually, it's three parts. Okay, so there are no arrows going to any other state. Right? So the accept state is a kind of input state, right? It only has inputs, arrows coming to it. It does not have any arrows going out. You can see that, right? These are all input arrows, but 0 arrows going out. Okay? So in a sense, the accept state is sort of the opposite of the start state. The start state has arrows going out to all of the other states, and the accept state's the opposite, right? It doesn't have any arrows going out to the other states, but it does have arrows coming in from all the other states, right? So for this one, 3 ins, 0 outs, whereas this one, 3 outs, but 0 ins. Okay? Hope you've digested all that. Now there's still another part to this second constraint, and that is that the accept state and the start state are not the same state. Well, that's sort of obvious from the inputs and outputs, right? So, so in other words, the start state, God, the start state and the accept state are different states. Okay? And from that you can deduce that in general a GNFA has to have at least two states. Okay? The start state and the accept state. At least. So, and we'll use that later. Right, now there's a third one, a third constraint. Oh, yeah, I might as well mention it now, but it takes me like almost a third way into the next square of the next session. But just out of completeness, so you got all three in one session. Now, in this third constraint, now you're looking at the states that are not the start state or the accept state. In other words, you're looking at these two, for example. Okay? For non-start and non-accept states, the other states, they all send arrows to each other, to all the other non-start, non-accept states. So this one would send one to here, and this one would send one back. So in words here, except for the start and accept states, it's two of them, right? An arrow goes from every state to every state, and from each to itself. Ooh, that one's missing. Hold on, let me check. Is that missing? Let me check the text. Oh yes. Sorry, I've left out one. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. So except for these two states, the start state and the accept state, have a look at the other states, and each of them will send an arrow, a transition arrow, to every other state except these two, right? And so that implies that each of these non-start, non-accept states, they receive a transition arrow from every other state except these two, right? And they have a transition arrow back to itself. So I got worried, I left one out. So for each of these non-start, non-accept states, there'll be an arrow going out to every other such state, non-start, non-accept. There'll be an arrow coming in from every other state, except start, accept. And each of these states will have an arrow, transition arrow that loops back to itself. Like this one, like that one. Alright? That's it. They're the three constraints. Okay, and the next thing in the next session we'll talk about how you go about creating or generating, constructing a GNFA from a DFA. That'll be the next step in this process.